The stench hit Kalen first, a putrid mix of alien waste, cheap synthetic fuel, and the indescribable odor of too many species crammed into too little space. Xylos wasn't just the armpit of the galaxy. It was the festering wound everyone pretended not to notice. The space station hung in the void like a twisted metal parasite, its once gleaming hull now corroded and patched with mismatched panels, a testament to decades of neglect and exploitation. Kalen pulled his worn jacket tighter, more out of habit than any protection it offered against the station's perpetually malfunctioning climate controls. In some sections, you'd sweat through your clothes. In others, your breath would crystallize before your eyes. Here in the gutter, the lowest level of Xylos where the dregs of society pooled like toxic sludge, it was unpleasantly damp, the walls slick with condensation and substances best left unidentified. He moved with purpose, keeping his eyes forward, steps quick but not hurried. In Xylos, to hurry was to show weakness. To dawdle was to become a target. The narrow, twisted passages were crowded despite the late hour, filled with shadowy figures conducting business best done away from whatever passed for authority in this lawless corner of space. Neon signs in a dozen languages flickered erratically, casting sickly rainbows across puddles of dubious liquid. Kalen had come to Xylos 3 years ago, though it felt like 30. The ex-military mercenary turned rogue archaeologist had found the Outer Rim station perfect for his needs. No questions asked, no extradition treaties, and a constant flow of rare artifacts filtering through from the far reaches of explored space. His expertise in identifying valuable relics from worthless junk kept him fed and housed, if nothing else. "Move it, human," growled a hulking Draxian, its translucent outer membrane pulsing with bioluminescent irritation as it shouldered past. Kalen sidestepped without comment. No point antagonizing something with acid sacs and 4 arms. Besides, he had business to conduct. Rumors of a Prelian memory crystal had drawn him to this particular section of the gutter, and if authentic, it could fetch enough credits to keep him comfortable for months. The black market district opened before him, a cavernous space carved from what might once have been a cargo bay. Makeshift stalls constructed from shipping containers and scrap metal formed a labyrinthine bazaar. Merchants hawked their wares, everything from counterfeit medications to possibly sentient fungi. The air was thick with the babble of 100 languages, electronic translators creating a discordant symphony of misinterpreted slang. Kalen navigated the market with practiced ease, heading toward the section where tech and artifacts typically changed hands. He brushed past a table laden with cybernetic enhancements of questionable origin, nodded curtly to a trinket seller he'd done business with before, and continued deeper into the market's heart. It was then that a commotion near the market's eastern edge caught his attention. A small crowd had gathered, their diverse body shapes forming a loose semicircle around something on the ground. Normally, Kalen would have walked on. Curiosity on Xylos often led to troublesome entanglements at best, death at worst. Yet something, intuition honed from years as a mercenary perhaps, made him hesitate. The crowd parted slightly, offering a glimpse of what had captured their attention. A humanoid figure curled on the filthy floor, naked and trembling. Even from this distance, Kalen could see the being was female in form, her skin an unusual pale blue that seemed to contain faint luminescent patterns just beneath the surface. She was clearly injured, with dark bruises marking her slender frame. Wouldn't even take 5 credits for her, a reptilian merchant was saying, mandibles clicking in distaste. Damaged goods. Can't even understand basic commands. Waste of space, agreed another trader, this one vaguely insectoid. The cleanup crews will take her with the rest of the trash. Kalen knew what that meant. The cleanup crews were glorified garbage collectors who didn't discriminate between inanimate waste and living beings deemed worthless. Anything they gathered was either compacted for disposal or, if organic, processed into protein paste for the station's lower-tier food synthesizers. He should have kept walking. He always did. Xylos was full of tragedies, and one couldn't survive here by playing savior to each pitiful case. Yet as he started to turn away, the female moved, raising her head slightly. Her eyes caught the harsh market lights, solid white with no visible pupils, yet somehow expressing a depth of terror and confusion that struck Kalen like a physical blow. Then she inhaled, and what emerged wasn't a cry or a plea, but a sound unlike anything Kalen had heard before. It was breath measured and patterned, a rhythm and oral. Code. The vibrations seemed to bypass his ears entirely, resonating directly in his skull with a haunting cadence. The crowd shifted uneasily, some backing away from the strange sound. See? Defective, the reptilian merchant hissed. Probably escaped from some lab. Good riddance. Something small and metallic around the female's throat caught the light. A broken control collar, partially embedded in her delicate skin. Kalen had seen similar devices used on sentient specimens in the more unethical research facilities that operated beyond Galactic Concordat jurisdiction. He found himself moving forward before he could think better of it. How much? Kalen asked, his voice deliberately flat, disinterested. The reptilian merchant blinked compound eyes in surprise. For this waste? You serious, human? I asked a question. Kalen maintained his neutral expression, though his mind raced. What the hell was he doing? 20 credits, and she's yours, the merchant said, clearly expecting haggling to follow. Kalen pulled a credit chip from his pocket and tossed it casually. 30, and you throw in whatever she came with. The merchant caught the chip with surprising dexterity, scanned it quickly, then reached under his stall. He produced a small metal container, which he slid toward Kalen with evident relief at making any profit from what he'd considered trash. All yours. No refunds when she dies on you. The merchant's mandibles flexed in what might have been a smirk. Kalen pocketed the container without looking at it and approached the female, who had curled tighter into herself at his approach. Up close, the patterns beneath her skin were more evident. Complex geometries that pulsed with faint light in rhythm with that strange, coded breathing. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her bare form. She flinched at the contact, but didn't resist as he carefully helped her to her feet. She was light, almost weightless, and burning with fever. Her strange eyes fixed on him with an unreadable expression. Let's go, he said simply, maintaining a firm but gentle grip on her arm, aware of the curious and predatory gazes following them. As they moved away from the market, Kalen felt the female stumble. Without hesitation, he swept her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body frighteningly frail. That strange rhythmic breathing continued, but softer now, almost a whisper against his chest. Navigating the back corridors of Xylos with his unexpected burden, Kalen couldn't help but question his sanity. He'd survived this long by avoiding complications, by keeping his head down and his business simple. Yet here he was, carrying a naked alien female of unknown origin through the station's most dangerous sections, making himself a target for every opportunistic predator in the vicinity. The female's breathing changed rhythm subtly, and Kalen felt an odd sensation, like fingertips brushing the surface of his mind, seeking purchase but finding none. The feeling was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving him unsettled. His small apartment was located in a relatively stable section of Xylos, a converted storage unit in a forgotten maintenance corridor that offered privacy, if not comfort. The security was of his own design, a combination of old military tech and scavenge station systems that kept most intruders at bay. As the door slid shut behind them, Kalen finally allowed himself to contemplate the full magnitude of his impulsive action. He gently placed the female on his narrow bed and stepped back, watching as she curled into herself again, those strange eyes never leaving his face. "What the hell have I done?" he muttered to himself. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed once, brighter than before, as if in response. Kalen's apartment was a testament to functional paranoia. The single room measured barely 5 meters square, but he'd utilized every centimeter with military efficiency. A narrow bed occupied one corner, opposite a compact kitchenette and sanitizer unit. Storage compartments lined the walls, most secured with biometric locks. The few visible possessions were practical: weapons, tools, and the occasional artifact he hadn't yet sold. The blue-skinned female hadn't moved from where he'd placed her on the bed. She remained curled beneath his jacket, those pupilless white eyes tracking his movements as he gathered medical supplies from a wall compartment. "I'm going to help you," Kalen said slowly, displaying the medical scanner and dermal regenerator. He wasn't sure she understood, but his tone seemed to register. The rhythmic patterns of her breathing slowed slightly. Approaching cautiously, he activated the scanner and ran it over her form. The readings made him frown. While humanoid in appearance, her internal structure was unlike any species in the device's database. Her core temperature was dangerously high for most carbon-based life forms, yet her other vitals suggested this might be normal for her kind. Most concerning were the multiple contusions and lacerations across her body, particularly around the broken control collar embedded in her neck. "This needs to come off," he murmured, examining the device more closely. It was sophisticated. Nanofibril extensions had burrowed into her skin, likely linking directly to her nervous system. Removing it improperly could cause severe damage or death. The female's breathing changed again, taking on that strange coated quality. As it did, the patterns beneath her skin brightened around the collar, illuminating the nanofibril pathways like a living circuit diagram. Kalen blinked in surprise. "Are you showing me how to remove it?" There was no response beyond a subtle intensification of the light patterns, tracing specific pathways away from the collar. Taking a chance, Kalen adjusted his micro-tools and began carefully severing the connections illuminated by the patterns. As each was cut, the light dimmed in that section, as if confirming his actions. Working methodically, guided by the shifting lights beneath her skin, Kalen finally detached the last connection. The collar fell away, revealing raw, damaged flesh beneath. The female shuddered once, a full-body tremor that made the lights beneath her skin flare brilliantly before subsiding to a gentle pulse. "Let's take care of these wounds," he said, applying antiseptic spray and activating the dermal regenerator over the most severe injuries. The device struggled to calibrate to her unusual physiology, but eventually began knitting the damaged tissue. As he worked, Kalen studied her more carefully. Her features were delicate, almost sculpted, with no hair and ears that tapered to slight points. The blue of her skin varied in subtle gradients, darker at her extremities and paler across her torso. The mysterious patterns beneath seemed to follow no discernible design, shifting and flowing like luminescent currents. When he finished treating her wounds, Kalen retrieved a hydration pack and offered it to her. "Water?" "Drink," he demonstrated by taking a sip himself. The female watched him intently, then hesitantly accepted the pack. She sniffed it cautiously before taking a small sip. Her eyes widened slightly, and she drank more deeply, apparently recognizing it as safe. "Good," Kalen nodded. "Now food." He prepared a basic nutrient bar, breaking off a small piece to offer her. She examined it with the same caution before placing it in her mouth. Her face contorted in what might have been disgust, but she chewed and swallowed nonetheless. "Yeah, not exactly gourmet," Kalen agreed with a hint of dark humor. "But it'll keep you alive." As the female finished eating, exhaustion seemed to overcome her. Her eyelids drooped, and the lights beneath her skin dimmed to a barely perceptible glow. Within moments, she had fallen into what appeared to be sleep, her breathing slow and regular, without the strange rhythmic quality it had possessed earlier. Kalen sighed deeply, running a hand through his short, graying hair. He'd spent the last 3 years avoiding entanglements, focusing solely on survival in this hellhole of a station. Now he'd taken responsibility for a mysterious alien female who was clearly valuable or dangerous enough to have warranted a neural control collar. He moved to the small desk tucked into another corner and retrieved the metal container the merchant had given him. It was lightweight, sealed with a simple mechanical lock that took seconds to pick. Inside was a single item, a small crystalline disc roughly the size of his palm, inscribed with symbols unlike any language he recognized. Holding it up to the light, Kalen noticed how it seemed to capture and refract the illumination in unusual patterns, creating ghostly projections of the inscribed symbols on nearby surfaces. "What are you?" he murmured, addressing both the disc and the sleeping female. As if in response, the patterns beneath her skin pulsed once, mirroring one of the projected symbols perfectly before fading back to their gentle glow. Kalen carefully returned the disc to its container and secured it in one of his locked compartments. Whatever connection existed between the artifact and the female, it would have to wait until morning. For now, he needed rest and time to think. Setting the apartment's security to its highest level, he arranged a makeshift bed on the floor using spare blankets. As he lay down, he found himself watching the gentle rise and fall of the female's chest, the subtle shimmer of light beneath her blue skin. "What have I gotten myself into?" he whispered to the darkness, but received no answer beyond the distant hum of Xylos's aging life support systems. Morning on Xylos was an artificial concept, marked only by the station's lighting systems shifting from night cycle dimness to the harsh fluorescence of day. Kalen woke instantly, a habit ingrained from years of military service and enhanced by life in a place where letting your guard down meant death. The female was awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed. She had wrapped his jacket around herself like a makeshift dress, the sleeves tied at her waist. Those strange white eyes were fixed on something she held in her slender blue hands, the crystalline disc he'd locked away the night before. Kalen sat up sharply. "How did you?" He glanced at the storage compartment, which showed no signs of forced entry. Its biometric lock was still active, keyed only to his fingerprints and retinal pattern. The female looked up, unalarmed by his sudden movement. For the first time, her face showed an expression he could interpret, something akin to concentration. She held the disc toward him, and as she did, the patterns beneath her skin aligned perfectly with the symbols inscribed on its surface. "They're the same," Kalen realized aloud. "The patterns in your skin match the writing on the disc." She nodded slowly, deliberately, the first clear indication that she understood his speech. Then she began that rhythmic breathing again, but this time the sound it produced seemed to resonate with the crystalline disc, causing it to vibrate slightly and emit a faint humming tone. Fascinated despite himself, Kalen moved closer, careful not to interrupt whatever process was occurring. "You're communicating with it?" Again, that deliberate nod, followed by more of the coded breathing. The disc's humming changed pitch, and suddenly, a holographic projection sprang from its surface. Star charts, unfolding in 3 dimensions above the disc. Stellar bodies, nebulae, and what appeared to be wormhole coordinates rotated slowly in the air between them. "Navigation data," Kalen murmured, his archaeologist's mind immediately recognizing the value of such information. Unknown star charts could lead to undiscovered resources, lost colonies, or ancient ruins filled with priceless artifacts. "Is this from your homeworld?" The projection shifted at his question, zooming in on a small star system near what Kalen recognized as the Cygnus Void, an area of space notorious for ships that entered but never returned. 3 planets orbited a dying red giant, and the hologram highlighted the second world, a blue-green sphere partially obscured by luminescent cloud formations. The female's breathing changed again, becoming almost musical. As it did, the patterns beneath her skin brightened dramatically, and to Kalen's astonishment, they began to extend beyond her body, projecting into the air around her like ghostly tattoos floating free of their canvas. These projected patterns interacted with a holographic star chart, adding layers of information. Atmospheric compositions, gravitational data, and what appear to be migration routes or flight paths weaving between stellar bodies. "You're not just reading it," Kalen realized with dawning comprehension. "You're part of it. The disk is incomplete without you." Her white eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to confirm his suspicion. She raised a hand slowly and pointed to her chest, then to the disk, then swept her arm to encompass the holographic display, before finally pointing to Kalen himself. The message was clear enough. She, the disc, the star charts, and now Kalen were connected in some way she considered significant. Before he could question further, a sharp banging on his apartment door shattered the moment. The female flinched violently, the holographic display instantly collapsing as the disc went dark in her hands. The patterns beneath her skin dimmed to near invisibility. "Zarth," came a gravelly voice through the door's intercom. "Open up, Kalen. Got information you'll want to hear." Kalen recognized the voice of the station's most prominent pawn broker and information dealer. A six-limbed Vexillion with a face like a melted candle and an uncanny ability to know everything that happened on Xylos within hours of its occurrence. "Stay quiet," Kalen murmured to the female, who had already retreated to the corner of the bed, pulling her knees to her chest. He quickly threw a blanket over her, concealing her completely, and moved to the door. Opening it just enough to reveal his face, Kalen greeted the alien broker with practiced nonchalance. "Bit early for social calls, Zarth." The Vexillion's gelatinous features rippled with what might have been amusement. "Social? No. Business, Kalen. Urgent business." 4 of his 6 eyes blinked independently, while the remaining 2 remained fixed on Kalen's face. "May I enter? Walls have ears and Xylos, as they say." Reluctantly, Kalen stepped aside, allowing the broker to slither into his apartment. Zarth's bulbous body barely cleared the narrow doorway, his multiple limbs tucked close to his torso until he was fully inside. "Cozy," Zarth commented, his head tentacles swiveling to take in the entire space in seconds. They lingered momentarily on the blanket-covered form on the bed before returning to Kalen. "I'll be brief. You acquired something yesterday. Something of interest to powerful people." Kalen kept his expression neutral. "I acquire things all the time. It's my job. Not artifacts this time," Zarth corrected, his voice dropping to a wet whisper. "A living specimen. Female. Unusual coloration. Ring any bells?" "Should it?" Zarth's face rippled again, but this time the expression was harder to read. "Playing dangerous games, Kalen. The collector is offering 50,000 credits for her return. Unharmed." Kalen maintained his poker face, but internally, his mind raced. The collector was a notorious figure in the Outer Rim territories, a wealthy eccentric who accumulated rare specimens, artifacts, and occasionally people, for reasons few understood and none questioned. His real name was unknown, his appearance a mystery, but his influence was felt everywhere, including, apparently, Xylos. "Sounds like good money," Kalen said carefully. "If I had what he's looking for." Zarth's head tentacles undulated with skepticism. "Please, Kalen, I respect your intelligence too much for such denials. The market has cameras. Primitive, but functional. The collector's agents are already searching the gutter. They will find you eventually. Why the warning, then? Not like you to risk crossing someone like the collector." The Vexillion's body seemed to deflate slightly. "I owe you from the Hezrat incident. Consider us even after this." He moved toward the door, but paused. "One more thing. The female? She's not what she appears. The last person who acquired one of her kind was found 3 days later, molecular cohesion totally disrupted, liquefied from within." His multiple eyes blinked in sequence. 50,000 credits might be generous compensation, considering. With that ominous statement, Zarth departed, the door sliding shut behind his amorphous form. In the silence that followed, Kalen turned to find the female had emerged from beneath the blanket. Her expression was unreadable, but the patterns beneath her skin had formed new configurations, sharp, angular designs that pulsed with a faster rhythm than before. "Is that true?" Kalen asked, already reaching for his sidearm. "Can you liquefy people?" She tilted her head, considering him for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she shook her head in negation. The sharp patterns beneath her skin softened, flowing into more circular, gentle configurations. Kalen wanted to believe her, but survival on Xylos demanded skepticism. "The collector is looking for you," he said. "Powerful, dangerous man. Want you back. 50,000 credits is a lot of money." Again, she seemed to understand. Her white eyes held his gaze steadily as she reached for the crystalline disk which she had hidden among the bedding. She held it out to him, then pointed to herself, then to the door, and finally made a pushing motion away, suggesting they should leave Xylos. Leave? Just like that. Kalen laughed without humor. There are only two ways off this station: registered transports, which require identification we don't have, or stealing a ship, which is suicide given the station's automatic defense systems. The female's expression didn't change. She simply repeated the gesture sequence, more emphatically this time. Kalen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Even if we could leave, where would we go? That star system you showed me? Near the Cygnus Void? Ships don't come back from there. She nodded, confirming his suspicion about their destination. Great. Certain death here, or probable death there. Some choice. He began pacing the small confines of his apartment. We need a plan. Supplies. A way to avoid the collector's agents until we can secure transport. The female watched him pace, her head tracking his movements. Then, unexpectedly, she stood. Kalen's jacket still hung from her slender frame like an oversized dress, but she moved with surprising grace. She approached him without fear and placed a delicate blue hand on his chest, directly over his heart. The touch sent an electric-like sensation through Kalen's body, not painful, but intensely foreign. The patterns beneath her skin extended again, flowing like liquid light from her hand onto his chest, creating ephemeral designs across his own skin that faded moments later. In that brief contact, Kalen experienced a flash of something. Not quite images or sounds, but impressions. A vast consciousness. A desperate escape. A mission of critical importance. And underlying it all, a profound sense of trust being offered. She withdrew her hand, and the sensations faded, leaving Kalen shaken. "What are you?" he asked quietly. In response, she picked up the crystalline disk again and held it against her chest. The symbols on the disk aligned with the patterns beneath her skin, and both began to glow with increasing intensity. Her breathing took on that rhythmic, coded quality, but this time, Kalen could almost understand it. Not as words, but as concepts flickering at the edges of comprehension. Preserver. Memory. Last. You're the last of your kind, Kalen guessed, the realization striking him with unexpected force. And that disk contains... what? Your history? Knowledge. She nodded, lowering the disk. Her expression remained serene, but Kalen thought he detected a profound sadness in the set of her shoulders, the slight downward turn of her mouth. And the collector wants you because of what you know, or what you are. She spread her hands in a gesture that clearly communicated both. Kalen sighed deeply. He'd spent years avoiding complications, keeping his head down, focusing only on survival. Taking her off station would mean abandoning everything he'd built here, meager as it was. It would mean making himself a target for one of the most dangerous individuals in the Outer Rim territories. It would also mean possibly discovering artifacts and knowledge beyond imagination, if they survived the journey. "I must be insane," he muttered, already mentally cataloging what supplies they would need. "Fine, we'll leave. But first, you need a name. I can't keep calling you female or blue." She tilted her head questioningly. "A name," Kalen repeated. "Something to call you. Do you have one?" She considered this, then shook her head slowly. The concept of individual names might be foreign to her species, or perhaps her real name was untranslatable. Lyra, Kalen decided suddenly, remembering an ancient Earth constellation near Cygnus. "I'll call you Lyra." The newly named Lyra tested the sound, her lips forming the word silently. Then she nodded once, accepting the designation. "All right, Lyra," Kalen said, already moving to gather essential supplies. "Let's figure out how to steal a ship." Preparing for their escape consumed the next hours. Kalen emptied his emergency cache of credits, packed concentrated rations and medical supplies, and assembled a small arsenal of weapons. His military-grade blaster, a vibra knife, and 2 concussion grenades he'd been saving for a particularly bad day. Lyra watched his preparations with those unnerving white eyes, occasionally touching items he packed as if familiarizing herself with them. When Kalen handed her proper clothing, a simple jumpsuit he'd acquired during his brief stint transporting cargo, she examined it curiously before donning it with surprising deftness. The clothing hung loosely on her slender frame, but it would attract less attention than his oversized jacket. "We need information," Kalen explained as he secured his apartment. "Ship schedules, patrol patterns, access codes. For that, we need to risk a trip to the information markets." Lyra nodded, tucking the crystalline disc into an inner pocket of her jumpsuit. The patterns beneath her skin had dimmed to near invisibility, whether through conscious control or some automatic camouflage response. Kalen couldn't tell. "Keep your head down and stay close," he instructed, checking the corridor before leading her out. "If we get separated, come back here and wait." Navigating Xylos's labyrinthine corridors during day cycle meant contending with the station's teeming population, a chaotic mix of species from humanoid to utterly alien. Maintenance workers, traders, smugglers, and beings of more questionable occupation crowded the main thoroughfares, creating a perfect environment for anonymity if one knew how to blend in. Kalen moved confidently but unobtrusively, keeping Lyra close beside him. He'd given her a breath mask, ostensibly for protection against Xylos's occasionally toxic atmosphere, but primarily to conceal her distinctive features. With the mask covering the lower half of her face and a hooded cloak obscuring her blue skin, she could pass for any number of humanoid species at a casual glance. The information market occupied a repurposed hydroponics bay, the original growing vats, now serving as private booths where data brokers conducted their business. The air was thick with electronic interference, deliberate signal jamming to prevent eavesdropping, creating a persistent static that made Kalen's teeth ache. He headed for a booth operated by a being he knew only as Wire, a cybernetically enhanced human whose original body had been largely replaced with salvage tech. Wire's specialty was transport schedules and security protocols, information crucial for their escape plan. As they approached the booth, Lyra suddenly gripped Kalen's arm, her fingers digging into his flesh with surprising strength. He followed her gaze to see three figures entering the market from the opposite side, humanoid in general shape, but with distinctive exoskeletons covering their upper bodies and heads. Even at this distance, the insignia on their armor was visible, a stylized eye within a six-pointed star. "The collectors. Agents," Kalen muttered, immediately changing direction. "We need to go." Too late. One of the agents had spotted them, nudging his companions and pointing directly at Kalen and Lyra. All three began moving purposefully through the crowded market. "Run," Kalen ordered, pulling Lyra toward a service corridor he knew connected to the lower maintenance levels. They pushed past startled market-goers, ignoring protests and curses as they fled. The corridor narrowed sharply, barely wide enough for two people to walk abreast. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping unidentified fluids that pooled on the grated floor. The lighting here was erratic. Sections plunged into darkness interrupted by pools of harsh illumination. Behind them, Kalen could hear the agents shoving people aside, their heavy footfalls echoing on the metal grating. They were gaining ground. "This way," he hissed, pulling Lyra into a side passage so narrow they had to turn sideways to traverse it. The passage opened onto a vertical maintenance shaft, a dizzying drop broken by maintenance platforms and access ladders stretching both up and down beyond the range of vision. Without hesitation, Kalen swung onto a ladder and began descending, Lyra following with unexpected agility. They had descended 3 platforms when the agents appeared at the opening above, their exoskeletal armor gleaming in the shaft's intermittent lighting. "Stop, or we fire," one called, already aiming a weapon that hummed with energy. Kalen drew his blaster and fired upward, not aiming to hit, but to force them back from the opening. The energy bolt struck a pipe near the agents, releasing a cloud of steam that momentarily obscured their position. "Keep going," he urged Lyra, who had already resumed climbing down. They descended further into Xylos's underbelly, eventually emerging onto a little-used maintenance level where the station's waste processing systems churned endlessly. The stench was overwhelming, but the labyrinthine arrangement of massive purification tanks and recycling units provided excellent cover. Pausing behind a processing unit, Kalen checked to ensure they weren't immediately pursued. "We need a new plan. The information market is compromised, and my apartment won't be safe anymore." Lyra's white eyes gleamed in the dim light as she removed her breath mask. The patterns beneath her skin had become visible again, pulsing with a rapid rhythm that suggested agitation or fear. She reached into her pocket and withdrew the crystalline disc, holding it up between them. "The disc? What about it?" Kalen asked, still catching his breath. In response, Lyra closed her eyes and began that rhythmic, coded breathing. The patterns beneath her skin aligned with the disc's symbols, both beginning to glow with increasing intensity. The holographic display manifested again, but this time, instead of star charts, it showed a detailed schematic of Xylo's station itself. "Station schematics," Kalen breathed, amazed. "How did you?" The hologram zoomed in on a section of the lower docking ring, a high-security area where private vessels were moored. One berth was highlighted, Bay 42C, containing what appeared to be a small, sleek vessel of unfamiliar design. Lyra pointed to the ship, then to herself, then made a circular motion that encompassed both of them. "That's your ship?" Kalen asked incredulously. "It's still here? On Xylos?" She nodded, her expression intent. "Let me guess. The collector has it under guard." Another nod. Kalen ran a hand through his hair, considering. "So instead of stealing any ship, we're going to steal a specific ship that's already under surveillance." "Perfect." Lyra touched his arm lightly, drawing his attention back to the holographic display. It had shifted to show the ship's interior, a compact vessel designed for a small crew, featuring technology unlike anything Kalen had encountered. Most notably, the control interfaces appeared to match the patterns visible beneath Lyra's skin. "It's key to you," he realized, "to your biology or whatever those patterns are. That's why the collector can't just take it and leave. He needs you to operate it." Lyra confirmed with a nod, then expanded the hologram to show the docking bay security systems. The display highlighted access points, patrol routes, and what appeared to be blind spots in the surveillance. "You're quite the strategist for someone who doesn't speak," Kalen commented with grudging admiration. "But even with this information, getting to that ship won't be easy. The lower docking ring is one of the most secure areas on Xylos." Lyra's response was to touch the disc to her forehead, causing the holographic display to shift again. This time, it showed access codes and security protocols, information that would normally cost thousands of credits from someone like Wire. "Where did you get these?" Kalen asked, though he suspected the answer involved abilities he couldn't begin to comprehend. Lyra merely tapped her temple with a slender blue finger. "Right. Mind powers." "Of course." Kalen shook his head, but couldn't suppress a small smile. "Well, if you can do that, what do you need me for?" Her expression turned serious. She pointed to the security personnel visible in the holographic display, then made a shooting gesture with her hand. "Combat support." "Fair enough." Kalen checked his blaster's charge. "We'll need to move fast. Those agents know we're on the lower levels now, and they'll be searching methodically." Lyra deactivated the disc, returning it to her pocket. She reached out and gripped Kalen's hand firmly, her cool skin contrasting with his warmth. In that touch, he again felt that strange electric sensation accompanied by impressions, determination, urgency, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Trust, perhaps, or hope. "Let's go," he said, squeezing her hand briefly before releasing it. Bay 42C awaits. Navigating to the lower docking ring required traversing some of Xylos's most hazardous areas. The maintenance tunnels connecting the waste processing level to the docking facilities were rarely used for good reason. Structural integrity failures had created sections open to vacuum, sealed only by emergency force fields that flickered ominously. Kalen led them through, relying on knowledge accumulated during years of exploring the station's forgotten corners. Lyra followed silently, her movements graceful despite the unfamiliar terrain. Occasionally, they would pause while she consulted the crystalline disc, adjusting their route to avoid security patrols or structural dangers. Twice they encountered other beings, maintenance droids that ignored them entirely, and once a group of scavengers who backed away at the sight of Kalen's drawn blaster. No one ventured into these depths without good reason, and few would risk confrontation when there was plenty of station to scavenge without conflict. After what felt like hours of careful progress, they reached a maintenance hatch that, according to Lyra's holographic map, opened directly into a service corridor adjacent to docking Bay 42C. Kalen pressed his ear to the hatch, listening for movement on the other side. "Sounds clear," he whispered, extracting a compact multi-tool from his belt. "Let me bypass the lock." As he worked on the hatch's security system, Lyra suddenly stiffened beside him. The patterns beneath her skin flared brightly, then dimmed to near invisibility. She grabbed Kalen's arm, pulling him away from the hatch just as the lock mechanism emitted a soft beep. The hatch swung open from the other side, revealing one of the Collector's agents examining the security panel with suspicion. The agent's head, encased in the distinctive exoskeletal helmet, swiveled toward their position. Kalen reacted instinctively, driving his vibro-knife into the gap between the agent's armor plates. The blade hummed as it penetrated, finding the vulnerable junction where exoskeleton met flesh. The agent collapsed with a muffled grunt, limbs twitching as the vibro-knife's energy disrupted his nervous system. Dragging him might be suspicious, but if we leave him, his buddies will know something's wrong, Kalen muttered, quickly searching the fallen agent. He found a security pass, a communication device, and a weapon similar to those carried by the agents in the information market. They pulled the unconscious agent into the maintenance tunnel and secured the hatch behind them. Lyra examined the agent's exoskeletal helmet with evident curiosity, her fingers tracing its contours. "Focus, Lyra," Kalen whispered. "We need to move." The service corridor was eerily quiet, illuminated by recessed lighting that cast long shadows along its curved walls. Kalen consulted the security pass he'd taken from the agent, confirming it would grant them access to the docking bay. "Stay close," he instructed Lyra. "If we're challenged, let me do the talking." They proceeded cautiously, passing maintenance robots and automated cargo transports without incident. The lower docking ring security was primarily focused on preventing unauthorized departures, not monitoring internal movements, a vulnerability Kalen was counting on. Bay 42C's entrance was marked by a reinforced airlock bearing the standard docking protocols and, more recently added, the Collector's insignia. Two agents stood guard, their posture alert despite the routine nature of their assignment. "We need a distraction," Kalen whispered, pulling Lyra into an alcove housing environmental control systems. Something to draw them away from the entrance. Lyra considered this, then reached into her pocket for the crystalline disc. Instead of activating it as before, she pressed it against a maintenance terminal embedded in the wall. The disc pulsed once, and the terminal's display flickered, showing rapidly scrolling code before stabilizing. An alarm blared from further down the corridor, accompanied by flashing warning lights. A computerized voice announced, "Environmental hazard detected in Section 17. All personnel evacuate immediately." This is not a drill. The guards exchanged glances before one spoke into a communication device, apparently receiving confirmation of the alert. Both then moved away from the airlock, heading toward the supposed environmental hazard. "Impressive," Kalen acknowledged, leading Lyra quickly to the now unguarded entrance. He swiped the stolen security pass, and the airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. The docking bay beyond was cavernous, designed to accommodate vessels much larger than the one they sought. Secured in a berth near the far wall was a ship unlike any Kalen had seen before. Sleek, organic-looking, with a hull that seemed to shimmer with iridescent patterns reminiscent of those beneath Lyra's skin. "That's it?" he asked unnecessarily, already moving toward the vessel. Lyra nodded, her pace quickening as they approached. The ship appeared small by interstellar standards, perhaps 30 meters in length, with smooth lines that suggested atmospheric capability as well as space travel. No visible weaponry or external engines disrupted its seamless hull. As they drew nearer, Kalen noticed additional security measures surrounding the berth: motion sensors, biometric scanners, and what appear to be energy-dampening fields. How do we bypass all this? In answer, Lyra stepped forward confidently, the patterns beneath her skin brightening to match the iridescent shimmer of the ship's hull. She extended her hand toward the vessel, and to Kalen's amazement, the security systems deactivated sequentially, lights shifting from red to green. The ship's hull rippled, a section flowing like liquid metal to form an entrance ramp that extended smoothly to the docking bay floor. Lyra turned to Kalen, gesturing for him to follow as she ascended the ramp without hesitation. The interior of the vessel was as alien as its exterior. Curved walls that seemed partly grown rather than constructed, with control interfaces that consisted of patterns similar to those beneath Lyra's skin rather than traditional buttons or screens. The illumination came from the surfaces themselves, a soft blue-white glow that pulsed gently. "How do we?" Kalen began, but was interrupted by a harsh alarm blaring throughout the docking bay. The guards had discovered the ruse. Lyra moved quickly to what appeared to be the control center, a circular chamber dominated by a raised platform surrounded by those pattern interfaces. She placed her hands against the patterns, and the ship hummed to life around them, the walls pulsing with increased luminosity. Outside, Kalen could hear shouting and the distinctive sound of energy weapons being primed. "We need to go now." Lyra's concentration was absolute, her entire body illuminated by the patterns within her skin as they synchronized with the ship's systems. The vessel shuddered slightly, then began to rise from its berth, the entrance ramp retracting and sealing seamlessly into the hull. Energy blasts struck the outer hull, creating ripples of light that dissipated harmlessly across its surface. The ship continued rising, rotating toward the docking bay's massive doors, which remained obstinately closed. "They've locked us in," Kalen realized, searching frantically for conventional weapons controls. Lyra's response was to intensify her connection with the ship. The patterns across her body flared brilliantly, and a corresponding energy signature manifested at the vessel's prow. A beam of concentrated light lanced forth, cutting through the docking bay doors like they were tissue paper. The vacuum of space beckoned beyond the breach, instantly creating a violent decompression that pulled loose equipment and unfortunate personnel toward the opening. Emergency force fields activated seconds too late, sealing the breach only after their ship had already slipped through into the starlit void beyond. That was... Kalen couldn't find words to describe what he'd just witnessed. "Are they going to pursue us?" Lyra shook her head, gesturing to displays that showed xylos falling rapidly behind them. The ship's propulsion system, whatever it was, accelerated them far faster than standard engines could manage. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, Kalen found himself drawn to a viewport, watching as the decrepit space station dwindled to a distant speck. For 3 years, that corrupted metal labyrinth had been his home, or at least the place he had existed. He felt no nostalgia for its filthy corridors or dangerous inhabitants, yet its disappearance marked the end of a chapter in his life. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked, turning back to find Lyra still communing with the ship's systems. "Your homeworld? The one in the star charts." She disengaged from the control interface, the patterns, beneath her skin settling into a more subdued rhythm. She nodded once, then gestured for Kalen to join her on the raised platform. When he did, she took his hands and placed them against 2 of the pattern interfaces. Immediately, he felt that now familiar electric sensation, but magnified tenfold. Images flooded his mind, not remembered or imagined, but directly experienced. A world of breathtaking beauty, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life, cities grown rather than built, integrated perfectly with natural formations. A civilization of beings like Lyra, their skin adorned with patterns that communicated more effectively than spoken language ever could. Then darkness. A terrible, consuming darkness that devoured stars and planets alike. A desperate plan. Preservation ships scattering across the galaxy, carrying the last preservers, beings capable of storing and transferring the collective knowledge and history of their people. Lyra, captured. The Collector, experiments, escape. Kalen gasped as the connection broke, staggering backward. You're not just the last of your kind, he said, his voice hoarse. You're their archivist. They are memory. Lyra nodded solemnly. She touched her chest, then extended her hand to encompass the ship, the stars beyond, and finally, Kalen himself. And now I'm part of this, he realized. Whatever this is. Her expression softened, and for the first time, Kalen saw her smile, a gentle curve of her lips that transformed her alien features into something unexpectedly beautiful. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. The ship hummed around them, accelerating toward coordinates only Lyra fully understood. Ahead lay unknown dangers, the mystery of the Cygnus void, and possibly the ruins of a civilization beyond human comprehension. Kalen found himself smiling back. After years of aimless survival, of collecting artifacts with no purpose beyond profit, he had somehow stumbled into something genuinely meaningful. The irony wasn't lost on him. A former mercenary turned reluctant archaeologist, now guardian to perhaps the most important living artifact in the galaxy. Well, Lyra, he said, returning the pressure of her hand, lead the way. The crystalline disk glowed softly between them as Lyra activated it one more time. The holographic star chart appeared, highlighting their course through the Cygnus void toward the system with the dying red giant and the blue-green world that had once been her home. As the ship carried them deeper into uncharted space, Lyra rested her head on Kalen's shoulder, and for the first time since he had found her abandoned and naked in the alien market, her breath came soft, slow, easy, without the coded rhythm of fear or urgency, because she knew, at last, she was going home.